And hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge, back once again with another instalment of my ongoing weekly series, Valiant to the Last, in which I look at, review and read every single Valiant Deluxe Edition hardcover since the 2012 reboot. No further ado, today we are looking at the 2018 Shadowman series, written by Andy Diggle, who I'm quite a fan of. Really enjoyed his Green Arrow run and a few of his other comics that I've read. So let's just dive straight into it. This is a deluxe edition that was produced, or rather a series that was produced in a deluxe edition that was produced after the 2018 DMG takeover of Valiant Entertainment, and that seems pretty obvious from the layout here. Now we're deviating away from the standardized layout with the image banner and top banner that we're used to, and what we're seeing is a singular one-page splash. I think this is an alternate cover for issue 3 or issue 4 of the series, something like that. Anyway, we've got it here. It's striking, but I could take it or leave it. Looking at the spine, again, we're in the white spine era of DMG, as I like to call it, which basically means it looks like this, and it looks slightly different to the subtle diagonal hatching of the other Valiant hardcovers we've looked at. And then on the back, we've got a relatively standard layout, Rise of the Shadowman splash text. Looking at the inside flaps, we've got a nice simple French flap. This one is laid out correctly, and some of the ones we've seen over the last month or so have not. They've been very wide and very kind of skewed and mismatched. And similarly on the back here, a nicely laid out French flap there. Popping the dust jacket off, we have a slightly different feel to the buckram here. This is a slightly softer fabric. Ooh, sorry. Can you hear that? Can you hear that? This is a slightly softer fabric, almost velvety in the feel of it. Some of the later Valiant Deluxe editions have that. Clearly, whatever printers or binders that they use kind of have that as their standard. In terms of the logo on the front, it's Shadowman with his new 2018 logo, which, like I said, I can take it or leave it. And it is stamped in silver foil, so you can feel it with your fingertips, and also, as you can see, it's silver there. Spine looks fine. This would look good raw on your shelf. A little bit different to the previous Shadowman volumes we've looked at, which were just black on black, but frankly I think the silver looks nice. And then we've got a nice clean back. On the inside we've got plain black end leaves. I only read this the once, as in literally today, but as you see, not much creaking. The spine isn't a mouse trap like some of the previous ones have been. So let's look at the contents here. This is a 2018 series, and the entirety of that series. To start off with, it has a 3-issue arc called Fear of the Dark. Then it has a 4-issue arc called Dead and Gone. And then it has a final 4-issue arc called Rag and Bone. And then it has a one-shot called Shadowman Rai Sremurd. I think that's what it means, which we'll talk about at the end. Before I dive into it, what I want to point out here is that this series is set after the previous Shadowman comic, and in fact I suppose after the last thing we looked at, which was Dr. Mirage, but also between that Shadowman series and this 2018 Shadowman series, the events of Rapture occur. Now, if you'll remember, in the Ninjak reading guide that I did, Rapture was something that I read kind of in the middle of that, because it is very much a Ninjak story, but it's also very much a Shadowman story. And it's referenced here, and it is kind of a key event linking up the final steps and final moments of the previous series with where this series then picks up. So what I would say, and I will have this on the eventual reading map that I'm putting together, Rapture sits between that Shadowman series that ended in 2014 and this one, which started in 2018. Right, with that out of the way, let's have a look at the first arc, Fear of the Dark. Here are the 3 covers. I quite like the style, just having different images of like face portraits for the covers there. The story itself is decent. It is well written, I've got to be honest. I love this image, I love this bad guy. How cool does he look? It's written by Andy Diggle, very competent, very, very nicely put together, very nicely composed. And essentially this first arc is just the return of Jack Boniface, Shadowman. At the end of the previous series, sort of what he was doing and his behaviour had kind of led him into a particular position and place. Rapture is a story about him leaving that position and place. and then this is him basically coming back to Earth. So it's kind of like a soft reset of the story. Yeah, it's well written, well characterized, competent artwork. And then here, as you can see, we have the Dead and Gone arc beginning. So looking at this, yeah, artwork remains consistent. And the storyline for this is quite clever. It's a little bit like Time and the Batman, if you remember that from 2010 or so, when Batman was thought to be dead, but in fact was tumbling through time and like inhabiting different eras and different ancestors and so on. This is very, very similar to that now I think about it. And it's a good story. It's interesting. It makes sense. Now, I know what I'm saying probably sounds a little bit counterintuitive based on what I've said previously. I really don't like fantasy, I really don't like horror. That's not entirely true. So, for example, I think one of the fantasy stories that I do like very much is both Witchblade and Darkness. Big fan of both of those. But that's because they're superheroes with supernatural powers, rather than supernatural magical things happening, superheroes optional. And it's the latter that I don't like, because the latter for me feels quite clumsy and it feels like it's conducive to poor storytelling. And I've been thinking about it a bit for the last couple of days, and I think one of the reasons is when you have magic, you have a lack of structure and you have a lack of rules to what happens to your characters and what happens in your world. There's something, oh great, we'll just draw a magic circle and do a magic thing and then the magic will cure it. It's kind of like having the ultimate get out clause, because you haven't really clearly defined what the parameters of your world is. This is, I guess, the biggest flaw I had when reading Exo Manowar. I found it slightly frustrating that the armor's abilities had never been clearly articulated. So you didn't know what his weaknesses are, and you didn't know what particular abilities it had. And something I constantly compared that to was the Gaiva, the Japanese anime and the Japanese manga, which had very clear abilities and very clear limitations. And Exo Manowar kind of fell down for me on that point. And similarly, a lot of fantasy and a lot of supernatural stuff falls down for me on that point. It's kind of the case of, oh hey, we're doing what now? Oh, give me a second. Yep, here we are. This is Rag and Bone. This is the next splash with the covers there. But yeah, what's I saying? So I think that's the thing that annoys me most about fantasy and supernatural stuff, that it doesn't have that kind of structure, and so I never really get a good sense of the stakes. And even when I've read some Constantine and Hellblaze, it's kind of a similar thing. Oh, someone's backed in the corner. Oh, right, they pull out a magical vial full of someone's magical tears that they've got from some ancient pact ages ago that allows them to do X, Y, and Z. And it really, for me, feels like not only does it strip away the sense of tension that I expect, but also it always feels like every kind of payoff is a bit of a deus ex machina. It kind of comes out of nowhere. And it's like, well, you can always write yourself in a corner because you can always write yourself out of it. Whereas things that are based in a slightly more realistic context, and I don't mean like realistic as in no superpowers, but just as in the sense of they have very clear rules and very clear defined rules. Superman goes into space and no one can hear him talk because there's no air. The end. Superman has a weakness, kryptonite. The end. Red sun light rays. The end. That sort of stuff. It's much clearer than what I tend to find in a lot of supernatural stuff. That said, this series, this 2018 series by Andy Diggle, is very tightly controlled. It's very well defined. And other than this character, he's a character called Nil, who turns up in issue 8. And is in issues 8 to 11 with zero fucking explanation of who she is and what she can do. That's weird. But other than that, everything here is kind of coherent and makes sense and is internally consistent. And yeah, I have to be honest, I enjoyed it. I have to be honest, I did enjoy this series. And it ends with a nice new status quo for Jack Boniface. Anyway, with that said, the series ends well. Ends in an interesting way. It's overall a good story, I have to say, and I quite like the different artwork styles they use. Here we've got quite a painted artwork style, which they used a little bit, and it's just generally enjoyable. I have to say this was decent. That takes us to the end of the 11th issue, which is the end of this entire Andy Diggle series. What we then have collected here is a one-shot called Shadowman Rai Sramurd. Now, this was actually printed and published before any of this series, before these 11 issues. And when you look at Shadowman's abilities, costumes and appearance, this is clearly set after the events of Rapture, but before issue 1 of this series. So I don't know why this is collected at the end. I kind of can suspect why. It's because this is a self-contained one-shot that has no impact on anything. It has no impact on anything to do with the Shadowman series. So you can read it whenever you want. And if they collected it at the beginning, it would have been like a really random one-shot non sequitur at the start of an 11-issue storyline. So I kind of understand that. But at the same time, sticking it here at the end means it's not in chronological order, so it's kind of annoying. If anything, this would be maybe in the last part of a Rapture oversized deluxe edition, if that's what they did. But anyway, it's here. If you can track down this issue, fine. If you can't, do not worry about it. It has nil impact on anything. It's just a random self-contained one-shot Shadowman story. And like I say, it's set between Rapture and issue 1 of the 2018 series. Looking at the gallery here, usual stuff, decent artwork, black and whites, textless variants of stuff, and some DVD-style extras. A couple of alternate covers and bits and pieces. Artwork is good. And there we go. I'm going to level with you all. This is slightly emotional because this is actually a bit of a watershed moment in my series. This is the last Valiant physical deluxe edition that I'm going to be reviewing, because that's the last one that they created in the 2012 era. This is all of it. We've gone through all of them. That's not the end of the series. Shadowman continues, and the homework next time is going to be looking at the Punk Mambo miniseries from 2019. 5-issue miniseries, we're looking at that. And there's a few other miniseries after that. And then I've got a couple of ideas for a couple of wrap-up videos, including kind of doing an overall pricing of my deluxe edition collection. If anyone's interested in that, let me know. And then also, as well as that, I want to do an overview of the final kind of map that I've done as like a reading map for this, and how I'm going to make that available and share that with everyone. But yeah, this is going to be the last Skycam video for Valiant, other than any kind of bonus ones I do if any of my custom buy-ins and so on come back. But yeah, this is the final deluxe edition I bought. Crazy, it is wild. I'm really glad I've been doing this series, because if it wasn't for this, I wouldn't have got around to reading them, to be honest. With that said, so next week's homework assignment is to read the Punk Mambo miniseries. It's a 5-issue miniseries collected as a trade paperback. Yeah, right. We'll be diving into it next time.
All right, thanks for watching, everybody. As always, please like, comment, subscribe. As always, please follow me on Twitter at I am Thomas Judge, where I will post a daily review of whatever comics I've been reading. You can get an idea of what I'm up to on the channel. And as always, please support the channel by heading over to Amazon.com and checking out my prose novel about superheroes. It's a completely original piece of work. The first episode in it is called Arrivals, and the series as a whole is called No Gods or Kings. You can find an excerpt of that on my website, nogodsorkings.com. Until next time, everybody, stay classy.